topic for today, and just to make sure everybody understands, we are being recorded as we speak right now, so I will be giving education, not direct advice. That's very important. But this is one of a whole series of programs that the Senior Law Day Collaborative offers. I am going to, as we've committed to a lot of individuals, to distribute both the slides for this presentation and some other information about the Senior Law Day Collaborative. And what it offers is programs from long-term care to elder law to should I stay or should I go? It's a presentation that I put together for the Senior Law Day a couple of years ago about should I move because of the taxes in New York. So lots of different things. But this is a collaborative between an individual planner, attorney, organization, right? In this case, with Mamaroneck Public Library and the Senior Law Day Collaborative. So let's go to the next slide. We got an agenda. I am going to talk a minute or two about myself and how come. Because everybody wonders, why do you do what you do? Well, there is a story behind it. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to then talk about basic finances. How do you organize what you're doing? What do you do for the daily finances? How do you do planning? I'm going to help educate you on some basic tools that will help get you there. And the tools are available as separate items if you ask for them. Right? We're going to talk about budgeting. We're then going to talk about financial literacy, basically investing. Right? Just very topical, not going deep down into the particulars, but giving you an idea of how you should invest or the questions that you should ask. Educate you on those questions. And then we're going to talk about the internet and potentially the dangers of the internet when you deal with your finances. And then I got a little piece that I just recently saw that I threw in. Was not part of the original agenda, but I'm just going to use I care a lot. Right? Is going to be the topic of the session. And then finally, who do you call? Because you know something, everybody has questions. You need to get answers, and you need to get impartial answers. You don't want to be sold. Right. Let's move on to me. All right, middle picture on the top, if you can see it. That was taken at my mother and father's 40th anniversary, 40 or 45th. I can't remember exactly. But the reason why we celebrate a big party on the 40 or 45th is, unfortunately, my mother didn't make it as long. Right? My mother was ill. She was actually brought to that party, right, in an ambulance. Got her, we were able to stand. If you notice, I'm close to her. I'm a big, heavy-set guy in the back with the beard. That's, as I said, about 25 years ago, right? So it was a little different. Everything was, black and dark-haired. But we had a wonderful party. The little girl with the hat in the front right now is 30 years old. That's my youngest. That's my youngest. So she's 30. Gives you, so actually I got to say it, probably about 25 years ago, because I think she was 4 or 5 in the picture. I've been doing this for a long time on the left. I've been doing presentations for the Senior Law Day pretty much from the initiation, which is about 20 years ago. I do charity work. Anybody that knows me knows that I wear a Santa suit a lot, or a Santa jacket. I wouldn't say a complete suit, a Santa jacket through the season, because I enjoy holidays. I enjoy family. Right? That's the most important part. And then the bottom left is my father, who made it to 99. Didn't make it to 100, made it to 99. Right? But I have 35 years of experience. I have a lot of professional designations. I am a registered rep and investment advisor. Right? I've got lots of experience because I started in 1985. So I experienced all sorts of market conditions. I promote stages of life approach to planning because everybody has different stages in retirement, and even, as I say, I pushed it out to 6 stages now. You start out in life, you have kids or partner up, start to have a life, then you do pre-retirement planning, retirement planning, then you start to do care planning, and then you have to do survivor planning. So if you look at it in stages, never putting ages on it, but always look at it as stages, it helps you understand what you need to do in each stage of life. So that's what we do, is we try to educate them. And then, yes, I'm continually educating myself because things change. We're doing this differently. Normally I'd be standing in the room downstairs at the Mamaroneck Public Library doing this live. We're not doing that anymore. That's just not happening, and I don't know when it will ever come back. So let's get into the beginning of the presentation. Well, all right. Everything starts with a budget. When you talk about finances and you talk about financial fitness, personal financial fitness, you need to understand the money that comes in, if this slide is big enough, but as I said, I'm going to talk over it. But you have to understand the money that comes into the household, whether it be for the individuals that are in retirement, could be a pension, could be Social Security, it could be investment income, bond income. Some people, when CDs used to pay 11%, people lived off of the interest income from a CD. So you have to understand what comes in, and sometimes there's more than different sources. You can have a husband and wife that are both alive and living together, so you have double sources of income. Right? Hopefully you have 2 Social Securities, 2 pensions, and you maybe have a significant income. But you know something? One of the things that I've realized in my 35 years of experience is, you have to forget about it. You have to understand where the money is going. So you have to understand your expenses. Because if you don't know where the money is going, it gets out of control. So actually putting together a budget, right, and identifying the expenses, and there's a whole bunch of different things from pets to personal care to entertainment. I'm not telling you not to go out, although we don't go out right now in this COVID environment, right? I understand movie theaters are opening up, but I don't know if I'm ever going to go back to one for a while. But you have to understand where it is. So maybe it's, hey, I added a budget. I used to have 1 movie channel on my cable box, if you're still a cable person, right? Maybe I have 5 movie channels. There's numbers that are involved, right? And one of the other numbers, depending upon where you're at in your life and where you're even at in your retirement, will be, do I need to keep putting money aside for the future? And that's what we're going to start to talk about next. Because you understand that you may have a set Social Security income. You may have a set pension income. Right? You do have, hopefully you do have other income from investments. When you use it, when you take it, and what it is, depends upon a couple of other basic investing philosophies. And now we're going to talk a little bit about that. So let's go into investing. All right. I can have highly educated people in this room, or I can have people that have no idea of anything. I'm going to talk about basic investing. Most individuals use some form of either a mutual fund or an exchange-traded fund or some form of pooled investment vehicle, because they don't want to pick individual stocks. And we'll talk about why sometimes you don't you don't want to pick individual stocks, but you want to have a pool of investments that are managed by people on a daily basis. So first educational note is pooled investments, right, are frequently better than individual investments. There are arguments. You can there's a popular TV editorial person who promotes individual investments, but he also always sits back and says it's not a bad idea to have some other pooled investments. I like to work with individuals, and we're going to go through how you decide to work with an advisor, not Joe, just an advisor, right? Who you want advice. You want them to educate you. Early conversations pre-meeting, the question came up about help a person choose an advisor. There's no slides on this or anything else, but this is the part of the segment that you should be thinking about that. Right? When you choose an advisor, he hopefully explains everything about your investments. What they do, what, different parts, how they will react in different market conditions. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But he needs to be an educator. He doesn't need to be a seller. If you know what you want, you can go buy it. You can deal with a broker. But if you want an advisor to help educate you and go through, ask the right questions. How do how do you get paid? There are commercials about this. Right? How do you get paid? Do you get paid, as an advisor, or do you get paid as a salesman, a broker? Different ways of talking about it. But that, there's a couple of other pieces that I will always tell you. There's government websites, you can check their backgrounds, so forth and so on. But all said and done, he is going to help guide you, educate you on, first, what is a mutual fund, and then the different types of mutual funds and why they may be appropriate. Next slide. Well, most people have a sensible, simple strategy. It's called asset allocation. We're quickly going to cover what it is, right? Why it's important, right? There are tools that allow you to turn around and identify, is it appropriate? Ultimately, what we're trying to do is diversify your investments. And then here's the part that's interesting. Again, education. Why is this particular investment portfolio or asset allocation strategy appropriate to you? That's financial fitness. If you understand what you are doing or what's going on in your portfolio, if it just feeds into that extra income piece that we were talking about early on. Because in the budget, you got income streams. If you have to take from your investments, there's other factors that you need to understand. Expenses, yeah, we're going to briefly talk about that, because sometimes if A, income is less than B, how long will my money last? So maybe you can't control income, but you can control expenses. So you might need to reduce your expenses to become financially fit. Next slide. Okay, simple thing. What is asset allocation? It's not putting all of your eggs in one basket, right? And why is it so important? Well, if you have identified your goals or your needs, right, it'll allow you to pursue them in a responsible way, right? Different strategies can maybe give you a higher rate of return than others. You have to understand why. You have to be educated. Why should I have some money in stocks right now? People may say, hey, stocks are too risky. Well, I'm going to try to explain to you, the different pieces and how to estimate what the risk is on different investment categories. Next slide. Well, where does it really start, right? Has anybody asked you how you feel about risk? There are all sorts of tools. The left-hand side of this is a risk profile questionnaire. Any decent advisor that you deal with will sort of start here, because an advisor should educate you and should understand you. If you are totally risk averse, he has to understand that. Because you have set goals. You have talked to, you have ideas in your mind. I need to generate an extra $1,000 a month in income. All right? How long is another part of it? How long do I need to generate the extra $1,000 a month in income? There are strategies to maximize income. Some people defer Social Security and use investments so that they get a higher lifetime Social Security than if they took it at normal retirement age or earlier. This is what an advisor will start to do, because that says, hey, I'm 67 years old. I get to retire at 67 in 7 months. Right? what is my magic number now. I don't know what it will be in the future, but right now it's 66 and 7 months. If I wait until age 70, I get approximately an extra 30% of benefit. I plan on living long, so that extra 30% of benefit could be valuable, especially if I have some other investments that I can maybe offset that delay in taking my retirement. That's a goal. An advisor has to understand it. So start asking those questions. Be prepared to answer those questions so that you can become financially fit. And then you have that time horizon varies. Next slide. Oh, here's that piece, which we talked about a little earlier. Each category of investment has different risk and return statistics. Previously the most conservative portfolio would be consisting of U.S. Treasury bills, backed by the U.S. government, right? Pretty much guaranteed by the U.S. government. There's all sorts of opinions out there, but there is a risk, and you have to understand when you buy a Treasury bill or a government or a bond, of any sort, there are risks that are associated. You have to be educated. I'm not going to get into all the details of it. But as you begin to see, it's a sliding scale. You have the lowest return usually is in bonds, right? Not always. Different times things happen, but you can get, you can make money on bonds in different ways. But they pay an interest rate. You buy a $1,000 bond, and there's an interest rate that's associated with it. So it's what you're going to get, and at the end, if you bought it from a good, government or from a high quality company, when the bond matures, you're going to get back your $1,000. So low risk. Problem is, right now you might buy a government bond at 1.5%. What happens if rates go up? There's a risk there. Right? So that's a risk there. But it's a lower risk, which guaranteed what you get. And then it goes all the way up from balanced funds, and you're talking about mutual funds, to large company stock funds, to medium company stock funds, to small company stock funds, and so many things in between that I can't describe them in such a short period of time, and I'm not going to give you advice. I'm going to teach you, educate you to realize there are many different types of investments. And when you do an asset allocation strategy and diversify a portfolio, you may use a little bit of everything, and you may look at it as a dial, right? If you're very aggressive, you turn the dial a little bit towards, stocks. If you're very conservative, you turn the dial a little bit towards fixed income or bonds. That's when you communicate with someone and they understand what your objectives are. Next slide. Here's another question that always comes up. How much will I need? Well, if I'm 65, I don't have a lot of time, but I should have a better idea of what my expenses will be. If I am 35, I now have to project what will I need in 30 years or someday. You may want to retire early or whatever it may be, right? So you have to understand, what am I trying to work towards? As I said, if the goal in retirement is to generate additional income, there are certain investments that will help you do that. If the goal is to accumulate for the next generation or for my retirement 30 years from now, depending on your age, you have to have an idea of what is that goal. It makes you, it contributes to your investment mix or your asset allocation. Next slide. Next question is, how long will the money last? I used a simple explanation before, where I was trying to bridge from normal retirement to maximum retirement for Social Security. There may be 3 or 5 years, so I have a time frame. Now I sit back and say, I just have this pot of money, my IRAs, my 401ks, my real estate, whatever it may be. I can't tell you, but I have this pot of money. And I spend X number of dollars a year. Well, a good financial professional or an advisor will help explain to you how long your money will last and why. Next slide. Oh, wonderful inflation. Let's talk about that. You know, we talk about a gallon of milk, we talk about postage stamps, we talk about a cup of coffee, we talk about a gallon of gas. Anybody realize that, you know, gas has gone up about 50% in 3 months? I don't know about anyone else, but all of a sudden now that we're starting to come back into life, right, and starting to drive a little bit more, right, gas went from, you know, from $2 a gallon to $3 a gallon, right? If I have to now, you know, add in the expenses that I didn't have a year ago because I wasn't going anywhere, my budget changes. That's why when you do a budget, you do not do it one time. You update it because things change. That's so important. Because one of the things I never want a person to do, and it's a whole different seminar, right, on how do you avoid going into debt. Because being financially fit sometimes says, I'm going to use real numbers for households. A household could have $20,000 in credit card debt at 13 to 28% interest rates. And that same household could have $100,000 sitting in a bank account earning 0.01%. It doesn't make sense. Financial fitness and an advisor will help educate you on why debt can be used constructively, can be a good thing. But at the same point, it also can hurt you financially. And that reflects in inflation because we don't know what future expenses are going to be. So we have to account for it. We have to constantly update to maintain our financial fitness. Next slide. What is this whole situation? It's a process. It's not a one-time event. And the goals of diversification, right, which is part of financial fitness, don't put all your eggs in one basket, is first, spread your investments, right? Yes, if you had invested in Bitcoin 3 months ago, you may be retiring this month. But guess what? A year ago, right, Bitcoin crashed, went down. I don't know what Bitcoin is going to do. I really, I'm not here to talk about that. But what it is if you put all your eggs in one basket, you can either make a tremendous amount of money or you can lose a tremendous amount of money. So diversification says spread amongst a couple of things. And then the next thing is, for financial fitness is if you understand your risk, you want to balance your risk. Because there's a risk level that everybody's willing to take. Once you understand that, and you match that to your goals, your time horizon, and so forth, right? Try to balance the risk. Try to get the two to equal out each other. So I'll take a little bit lower rate of return, but I know I'm going to take less risk. So try to get them to balance that piece. The next piece, which I always talk about, because I can't tell you in my 35 years of experience how many times it comes up. I sit with a person and he says, can you review, can you make a review? And again, this is education, right? Because most people don't necessarily know what they own. And what I mean by that is, the person tells me they're diversified. They own the Growth Fund of America, they own the MFS Growth, and they own the Vanguard Growth. But I'm diversified. The problem is there's overlap. Each of those funds, mutual funds, likely hold similar. They may hold different proportions, but they probably all own Microsoft, right? They may all own Apple. It'll vary, right? Maybe one owns 5% of Microsoft, one owns like 3%, but there's an overlap. So you have to understand the overlap, and you have to, make sure that you are diversified. So sometimes you have to add other assets or other funds to the portfolio. Then you start this whole process over again, and you know what? You review it, you balance again, and then you make sure your investments are spread. But that's financial fitness. Understanding first, and I'm going to rehash, right, for a second. First, what your budget is, what your income is, what your goals are, right, and then what your investments are. And how are they, what the expectations are of those investments. Next. Here's an underlying thought. I have two types of people that I deal with. One, I educate, and they do it themselves. They're a do-it-myself investor. That's great. You're going to come out of this and hopefully diversify, review, maybe look more closely at your investments, right? Hopefully you are going to have a budget, whatever it may be. And then there is a do-it-for-me person that says, I want you to help me. I want you to educate me, and, I could use some help. A lot of times the left side deals with brokers because they buy something, right? The right side deals with advisors, right, who are fiduciaries and have a responsibility to do the right thing for you. Next slide. All right, fast review. We talked about a little bit about volatility. Basically, not every investment stays the same. I didn't go into bear markets, I didn't go anything, but your advisor or your educator should talk about market volatility and what goes on and what taking place. One thing that this is a great introduction to, I gotta say, and we talked about it a little earlier, right? Is if the person you are dealing with says, "Trust me," right? Run, don't walk, run from that individual, because you need to understand, be educated on what your portfolio is going to do and why he's going to invest, or you're going to invest in these various items. You have to be educated, which we're going to go into the next stage of financial fitness, which is a financial plan, right? Why you need to, have that budget. You have to understand what's going on. The next, part, we talked about asset allocation. There's different types of investment, different categories of investments have different risks and returns, and you want to balance it out. Let's go to the next slide. So I'm looking down at my clock, right? You basically create a portfolio based upon your risk and return. Sometimes and I like when they say no cookie cutter portfolios, but there are accepted norms, and they just have to be updated because market conditions change, so you have to turn around and have it. That's when you should understand what's going on, and you should understand what the changes and the risks are, and why you may want to make some portfolio changes. Next slide. All right, here's where we come, start to talk about being financially fit. People do it for themselves. People engage other individuals. At Aging Issues Management, which is my company, we do a basic financial plan for everybody. Right? If you want a more advanced financial plan with very details, yeah, we have to charge for it. But why I'm saying is everything starts with that basic financial plan. Hey, budget, investments, right? And now we say, well, why is it so important? Why do you really have to understand or be educated that, you have to have a plan. You have to be educated that you should be looking at, at different time frames. So how does a financial plan work? Well, next slide. Financial plan could be very long and detailed. But one of the first parts of a financial plan is to say, hey, here's the money that I have, right? Where is it invested right now? Well, the left-hand side of this slide talks about, well, here's where I'm currently invested. But you know what? The right-hand side talks about what a target allocation would be based upon your risk profile and your time horizon. This particular portfolio is more conservative, right, than what was be recommended. What's the effect? Well, the effect is, historically, can't predict the future, but historically, right, that portfolio would have a 6.5% return. If you had a little bit more equity, right, in the portfolio, well, the return could be 7.5%. But what's the downside? The downside is the more conservative you are, the lower what we call standard deviation, the ups and downs. It doesn't move up and down as much. If you have more equities, it moves up and down. So this is what starts the process. Because once you understand this, we go to the next slides in a financial plan. We can now project how long your money will last based upon a couple of different factors. The bottom part, retirement income, includes Social Security, includes pensions, and so forth. But this is just a hypothetical right now. It's not yours. And then the top line says, well, if things go really bad, my money may only last until 80. If things go the way expected, it's going to last until age 90. If things go very well, I'll have excess money. I'll be leaving money to my next generation. Next slide. What does it end up proposing? You take a look at a projected cash flow. It says, here's my age, here's what my income flows are going to be, here's what my expenses are going to be. Let's project it out. Because you know something? You have time to make changes if necessary. And if the numbers change in between there, because as I often say, life happens. You have unexpected expenses. I can't tell you, what's going to take place, but this is important for you to understand because you have to update. This is not a one-time shot. This is a situation where you monitor it. I'm not going to tell you you have to monitor it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, right? Even an annual basis. But to revisit your plans often lets you be financially fit. And to understand what the effect of certain changes will be, to be educated on how those changes will affect you, help you become financially fit. Next slide. I threw this slide in here because there's two slides. Anyone that's in retirement qualifies for Medicare Part A immediately at age 65. File for it. I'm not doing a Medicare presentation, but this was the traditional format up until a few years ago, right? That you had a Medicare Part A, Medicare Part B, and then you bought a Medigap policy that filled in for those 20%. But anybody that has a Medigap policy realizes that the cost could be anywhere from $250 to $500 per person. Again, not trying to sell anything. And then there's Part D, and there's a wraparound for that. Funny thing is, Medigap policies usually don't cover dental, vision, or anything else, and they definitely don't cover long-term care. These are factors. Next slide. How many people have looked at Medicare Advantage or Medicare Part C programs? When I'm looking at a budget, if I've got husband and wife and I'm paying $500 a month for my Medigap policy, you may have an option to go to a Part C program or Medicare Advantage to either completely eliminate a premium or dramatically reduce it. You need to investigate it. 2021 is really interesting right now. Don't know if it will be extended, but 2021 gives you the opportunity to make changes that you didn't have. Especially if you go into a Medigap policy and don't like it, because there are different types of Medigap, Part C programs, Medicare Advantage programs, because there are different types of them. But get to an advisor, have him or her educate you on the programs, and then make an educated decision, because it could put theoretically $6,000 back into your budget. Next slide. All right, on the flyer we talked about cybersecurity and what's out there. To be financially fit, you have to be financially secure. Your information has to be secure. Well, she bounced forward. But one of the most important things that people have to realize is your information is out there, especially if you use electronic devices. So what ends up happening? In the worst case scenario, somebody can assume your identity. That's the worst case scenario. We all hear about identity. But what about a simple one account takeover, where all of a sudden they can control things, right? They can, get access, whether it be through, a username, log on, or potentially mobile phones, which are becoming more here. I will tell. I'm going to raise my hand right now because I got an alert from Experian that my mobile phone number was found on the dark web. This is the first time it's happened. I've had the same number for 15 to 20 years. It's on the dark web. I got to make a decision whether or not I want to take it, change phone numbers. So, because there are accounts that are associated primarily for what they call two-stage authentication. For that, but we'll talk about that. But an account takeover, what are the real statistics? Next slide. This is where you bounce. Well, in 2019, they didn't give us 2020 data yet, right? But there were 4.4 million people whose accounts were taken over. There was $6.8 million of losses. Not a lot of money, but unfortunately, look at the trend. Started out 5 years ago with 1.6, now it's 4.4. Why? Because electronic banking, all these other things are becoming, more standardized, right? I electronically bank. I pay my bills through electronics. I know other people that only will write paper checks. How many people here, or how many people in the room, unfortunately, their financial institutions, credit cards, everything else, ask for electronic payments. It's just easier and faster for them to get the money faster and for them to get at it, get at the money a little bit easier. Next slide. Well, this is the tips to prevent cyber breaches. This comes right off the AARP website. I can give you a lot of different things. If you ask for information, I have brochures from the Westchester County Attorney General's office because I have done presentations with them on preventing senior fraud. But it's common sense. I'm going to quickly go. Never give a stranger access to your or remote access to your computer. There are always people asking for it, right? I like the number 2. If you are going to do, which is pretty much often, you want to check your accounts, you want to do a lot of other things, have one device designated for that, and preferably a device that's well secured. All right? Don't use a lot of different devices. Don't use your phone, your PC, your laptop, your tablet. The more devices you have, the more exposure you have. Right? Don't use common passwords. I'm guilty of it. Right? Not for my financial sites, but I'm guilty of it for my my Amazon book site. Right? I've used that password for a couple of different things. Two-step authentication goes back to what we talked about. Why your phone is important is they're going to send you either an email or a text to say, is that really you? So if a person logs on from a computer they don't know, they're going to send you a message to say, are you on this computer at this location? And they know where it is. Right? Always make sure your software is up to date. Easiest way to do that is frequently just turn the device completely off. When you turn it back on, most devices will automatically look for updates. Right? Perform those updates. Don't say, I'll do it later. Do the updates. Right? The last one on here, number 7. Banks, financial institutions, they have ways of helping protect you. Whether it be extra levels of security and encryption, to something that I'm going to talk to you about going forward is a simple trusted contact form. That is so important for the next part of this presentation. Because the bank, if they think something's not or going awry, right, they have another person to reach out to say, I see unusual activity here, but I can't contact, and I can, God bless, they're both deceased, I can't contact your father, Al, right? Yes, he's dead, but when he was alive, I was the trusted contact, and we actually identified a caretaker opening credit cards for him under his name. It happens. But having a trusted contact with a financial institution, big piece, big piece. It actually was adopted by the NASD and SEC a couple of years ago in one of the financial reform acts. All right, so that's very important, especially if you're doing things digitally. Next. Oh, we just bounced into this. This is a new movie that I saw the trailers on, and I actually watched it after, when it came out on Netflix about a month ago. Anybody know what this is? I can't have, we're not doing raise hands, we're not have participation. Let's look at what this movie talks about. If you have Netflix or access to Netflix, I suggest you watch it. The movie's called I Care a Lot.
I saw it. It was excellent.
Yeah. The problem is, it's real life. Granted, they took, they did some things that I will say exaggerated, because yes, you have a crooked judge, you have a crooked doctor, you have a crooked lawyer, you have all sorts of people that are going on. But the underlying message is the same. First off, people realize that their financial files are digital, right? Joe Soricelli lives in Valhalla. You can find out, where I live, and you can find out what my house is worth. If you have more advanced software, right, you may be able to find out through the dark web or other sources that he has an account with Chase, he has an account with this. I mean, I found out about IRS fraud, all right, somebody filed a tax return for me, and then I dug in deep. And it's real easy for people, it's harder now, but 10 years ago plus when it happened to me, right, it was real easy for somebody to do it. They just intercepted a W-2 and then filed a tax return, which then gave them access, which they did do, is they gave them access to my profile with the IRS, and they created an IRS account and saw my last 20 years of tax returns. There's more security than there was at that time, and you can do things. And just for yourself, with the IRS, you can get a PIN. That without that PIN, nobody can access anything. So that's a level. But why I Care a Lot is so important is guardianships. They can be a very valuable tool in the right place. That's why they were established. That's why it is law. That's why the surrogates court can appoint a guardian. But what the movie talks about is if you don't have a trusted contact, or let's go to the next slide. If you don't have basic estate planning documents, if you don't have a power of attorney, if you don't have a living will, if you don't have a healthcare proxy, if your beneficiary designations are not known by other, by the financial situation, by other financial institutions, because there are people out there that are looking at it. And being financially fit is first understanding where you're going, and if you have been able to accumulate money, let's protect it. Let's protect it from cyber thieves. Let's protect it from unexpected people doing things. Because a guardianship, when it's needed, when somebody really can't manage their own affairs, it's great. But you also want to appoint it. But you know something? Next slide. It's big business. I am not saying any of these firms, but all you have to do is Google Guardianship Corporations, and this is just 6 of multiple pages of it. There are checks and balances within the system, but isn't anything else checks and balances can be abused. All right, we got 10 minutes going on. All right. The other thing which I wanted to bring into it, fast, and there's no slides on it. I've been doing this, as I said, for a long time. I've actually been working with senior citizens since 1993 when my mother first started to need assistance. And I actually attended the Robert Wood Johnson program given by Hillary Clinton in Washington. I went down to Washington and sat in the audience and listened to it. And they talked about, all sorts of things. They talked a lot about long-term care. They talked a lot about Medicaid. They talked a lot about things. But the funny thing about it was everything they did talk about, the life expectancies, were wrong. So why I say that is I've been working with seniors for a long time. And I've seen all sorts of scams. I worked with, as I said, Gary Brown, the Attorney General. I've been given joint presentations with him at various, facilities and so forth. And we always talk about a real simple one, but it happened to a client of mine 2 weeks ago. His wife passed away. And all of a sudden, out of the woodwork, and it's still one of the most common scams, right? And unfortunately, it's usually one of the most common scams, and it's perpetrated against a senior by an extended family member, a cousin who the surviving spouse hadn't talked to for years and years and years, called up and said, I'm in jail, gave a long sob story of why he's in jail. Can you meet my attorney outside of ABC Courthouse? He needs $5,000 in cash to turn around and bail me out. The interesting thing is the wife who passed was pretty much in charge of all the finances. The greatest thing in the world that this person said is, I just spent so much money on the funeral, the grave, all the other, and it was a lot of money. Right? It was unexpected. It wasn't from COVID. I'm going to say this. It wasn't a COVID case. Right? But he went through it. And then as soon as he hung up, he called me up, his advisor, and said, what do you think? And I have to say, I was not a happy camper. And I said, you got to be kidding me. Do you remember? Do you have any contact information? Do you have the attorney's phone number that you were supposed to call? He says, no, I never got that far. I said, great. Next time this happens, right, hey, tell them to call Joe at ABC 1234. Right? Because as an advisor, yeah, I'm not his guardian. No, he doesn't need a guardian or anything else. But I am his advisor, and I am familiar, and I am a trusted, in addition to me being a trusted contact on certain things, his daughter is a trusted contact, his son is a trusted contact. We're building walls. That's all you can do. All right, 353. Let's talk about the Senior Law Day Collaborative real fast. Visit it, www.seniorlawday.info. There are pretty much bi-weekly webinars on different topics, from estate planning to long-term care to housing to care providers. There's so many different things. We don't know about live events. There used to be live events. We don't know what's going on. I made a suggestion just recently to actually have a live event at the Westchester County Dam, the Kensico Dam Plaza, so it's outside. Maybe, in the end of the, in the fall or late summer, we might do it. Don't know yet. Too many, questions. But here's the big piece, and this is a flyer that I want you to request if you send me an email or if you contact the library or whatever, is there is a simple flyer, because the underlying guidance of the Senior Law Day, right, is if you have a question, we have somebody for you to ask. No obligations. None whatsoever. Everybody, worries. The reason why I've been participating in Senior Law Day for 20 plus years is because I volunteer. I can't, I call it my pro bono work. I'm not an attorney. I'm a financial advisor, but I'll just answer the question. And if you need the next step, yeah, maybe you do have to pay for advice for something. But we can give basics. Whoop, I got a timeout. Oh, we're timing? Okay, we're there. Last slide. Me. Want to reach me? My phone number, 914-468-0186, Joe at Aging Issues Info. My office is, for those who know, directly across the street from the New Rochelle Social Security office.